Ladies and gentlemen, this session is sponsored by Michigan Economic Development Corporation and Planet M. Joining John McElroy on stage, please welcome Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Argo AI, Bryan Salesky.
John.
Hey, Bryan. So they tell me you're from here. You're from Michigan.
I did, yeah. I grew up in Woodhaven, Michigan, actually. Yeah.
Ford stamping.
Anybody here downriver? Anybody? All right, okay, good. There's a couple.
So then what, you ended up at Carnegie Mellon?
Actually, I worked at Carnegie Mellon. I actually went to school at University of Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh. So that's what led me there.
And Carnegie Mellon has really kind of emerged as the epicenter of autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, they have, for the longest time, they were the robotics institute until Georgia Tech opened a robotics institute. So that was their, and they had the first PhD program in the subject, and obviously a lot of long history in doing everything from ground vehicle autonomy to all sorts of really cool projects.
What got you into autonomy?
Well, I think, I mean, I was trained as a computer engineer, so I had sort of a half software, half electronics background. And the thing that I really liked about robotics was that it was a tangible application of of what's otherwise a very virtual world in software. Being able to, at least in the early days, you could go and we'd write software in the back of a truck or back of whatever. I was part of an off-campus facility that if it had wheels or tracks, we could automate it, as used to be what we would say. And but just being able to see the fruits of all of that effort and see it in a real, tangible way is just will really draw you in. So,
from the end of the DARPA Urban Challenge up to about, I'd say, 2017, the rate of improvement in autonomy was breathtaking. I mean, it was amazing how fast things went forward.
Right.
And everyone was saying, as you know, oh yeah, by 2019, we're gonna have these cars on the road and everything's going to be going, and 2019 was last year.
Yep, it was.
Well, what happened? Well, why has everything slowed down so much?
Well, I don't know that it's slowed down. I guess my perspective is it is increasingly getting faster, actually. I mean, when you look at what we did, so the Urban Challenge was 2007. So you bracketed it right, 7 to 17. In that 10-year period, there was a huge change in a number of things. The amount of compute available to us, the amount of storage, cloud computing, general GPU programming, all of those things come together. Advents in machine learning. Deep nets wasn't exactly a new thing, but the way in which it was constructed, it made use of a whole lot of research from neural networks from many years ago. The difference is that all that compute that's available to us now that we can pack into a car, that didn't exist then, right? And so we can do new things and structure these nets in ways we hadn't originally thought of. But you add all that together, and significant progress has been made, even just in the last few years. That said, I try to be kind of the voice of reason in this whole sector, in that it's not like we're going to go from 0 to millions of vehicles tomorrow or the next day or the next year. It's going to be a gradual ramp, because let's face it, there's a lot more at stake here than just building the technology. There's also getting communities and cities and people to raise their education and awareness of the good things that autonomous vehicles can provide, why they should embrace these things in their communities. There is a long way that we have to go in order to get folks ready for this.
My simple understanding of it is that it takes so much data to teach these AI systems. And you've got all these edge cases, or sometimes they're called corner cases, that you've got to rack up so many miles to be able to capture them all. Is that really what sort of has prevented them from going on sale right now or being in service?
Well, I think there's real world data, real world examples is essential to build these systems. Okay, we're testing in 6 cities today. And it's really interesting to see, and it's the same software. People always ask me, is it different software per city? And it isn't. It's the same software, it's parameterized a little bit differently to adapt to the driving style. DC has 2-lane turning circles. Miami has tends to have very aggressive traffic. There's all sorts of nuances that you have to deal with, and the only way to get that experience is to test across those cities. But then we take that data, and yes, we train and make algorithms better, but we also learn how to test. We learn how to, it inspires new examples to make sure the system's working properly. And all of that over time, the system is just constantly improving. And the more data and the more real world examples we give it, it really accelerates its ability to learn.
Okay, so where you're at right now with Argo, how good is your system compared to a human driver?
So I would say that there is, if you break down the task of driving into, let's say it's 100 different features that you have to implement, I would say that in a number of those dimensions, we're better than a human driver at this point. Why is that? Because the car can see all around it. It doesn't get distracted, it does not get tired, and it's always learning.
It doesn't drink either.
It doesn't drink, that's correct, exactly.
So what I'm getting at is, are we going to let perfect be the enemy of really better than a human?
Well, we have to make sure that we don't let it do that, but safety is number one. We have to focus, the benefits that autonomous vehicles can provide, in addition to accessibility to people who maybe don't get a chance to experience personal mobility today because they're always getting driven, maybe they have a disability. There's also the safety benefits, right? And all of us who are in this industry who are working on any sort of vehicle automation, it doesn't even have to be full self-driving, we have a responsibility to put safety in front of everything and make sure that whatever we put out there, we know it's gonna work reliably. That's number one, and I'm of an opinion that when you're working on something that's this complex, putting arbitrary timelines on it is not helpful to anybody.
Yeah, I totally agree on that, but what I'm also getting at is that, and I've talked to plaintiff attorneys especially about this, they say, you know, how could you morally put out a product that will kill people? And my rejoinder is, why would you wait for something to be perfect when it could possibly save thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives? Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's going to save a bunch of lives.
I think a lot of folks are numb to the reality of the situation today, which is in the U.S. alone, it's 37,000 people die from traffic collisions. You look at it worldwide, it's actually millions, and people have somehow, for the longest time, it isn't this case anymore, but we used to have the statistic that in the age group of 18 to 35, it was the leading cause of death. I think it's been subsumed by something else now, but the point is that this is a major problem, and I think the general public doesn't necessarily understand it. We need to explain not just that it's not a good situation today, but that autonomy is one of the best bets that we have in order to resolve it. And again, I'm not the type of person who's going to come up here and profess and say everything has to be autonomous. I love driving. I do think we also should be working on making the cars as safe as possible and working across that whole stack, whether it's occupant protection, whether it's driver assistance technology. To me, the whole spectrum is important.
So give us your vision right now. How's this going to roll out?
Yeah, so I think what you're going to see is, because the cost of the technology is still somewhat high, and that's not going to it isn't going to come down until we see volumes go up. The way to do it is to deploy it in shared services today. So think of it as a ride-hailing type of application, or maybe it could be delivery. There's a lot of different business models, but it'll be owned shared fleets where they're monetized per mile, generally speaking, and or by whatever service it's providing. And what you can do then is spread now that cost over the lifetime of the vehicle. So actually, what this whole business turns into, and this is a great great chance to talk to my automotive colleagues, is this is, at least as it pertains to in the city, this is not a volumes-based business, at least not right away. This is an experiences-based business, right? This is about creating a long-life, durable vehicle that is able to be in operation, be maintainable, be cleanable, serviceable, keep it on the road, keep it earning revenue, because it's going to be in the shared fleet context for a while. Eventually, as the costs do come down, then I think we can make it available for personally owned vehicles.
Was it MIT came out with a study last year that said those autonomous cars are actually more expensive than cars with drivers in them for fleet service?
A lot of studies.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I read that one exactly, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It made the rounds, and I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, so
where are they wrong?
So what were the claims exactly, John?
Well, the claims was that you're still going to have a human operator monitoring these vehicles, even if they're not in the vehicle. And they're going to have a joystick so they can back it up or whatever.
I got you.
These things are going to have to go and get their sensors cleaned off, they claimed, every 50 miles. They're going to have to be cleaned every single, and when they added it all up, they said, you know what, it's not cheaper than having a driver.
So I think in the short term, they may be right. I think it's prudent to have a remote operator watch over these vehicles in the short term as you prepare for a launch, right? I think that over time, though, again, these systems are going to mature to a point where, at least in a predefined area, right, and we call that level 4 autonomy, the autonomous operation within, they call it a geofence, or within, it's not literally a fence, but within a predefined set of area that these, street by street, these are the places we want to operate. It will get to a point where you will need some support on the back end, but it won't need to be a one-to-one. So there's absolutely a business case here. I don't agree with that conclusion. But like all things, it's a time-phased thing. I think initially you are, just like we have 2 people in our car today in our vehicles because it's in development. They're watching over the system. Over time, that will go down to perhaps 1 driver. Over time, perhaps there's somebody who's doing some sort of concierge-like function in the vehicle to get people who don't understand or not used to the technology, get them used to it. Then eventually you go to remote operations, and eventually it's a stepping stone. It's a gradual thing. That's the key.
Gotcha. Great. Thanks. Tell us about Argo. Well, you guys have got Ford and Volkswagen as investors right now.
Yep.
How do you divide church and state with that and still be Argo?
Yeah, well, we set up the company from the start for OEMs to invest who wanted to be part of what we're doing. So we're focused on building the software and components that can drive the vehicle in these predefined areas, so level 4. We're clear with our partners before they invest that, look, we want to do this the right way. Safety's number 1. Again, we're not going to put arbitrary timelines in these things. We have to, we know that this is a long journey to take in order to get this completely scaled out everywhere. We do want to service billions of users. We want to get millions of these cars out there, but again, it's a gradual thing. And I think Ford was really aligned with us on those values. They also take a very thoughtful approach at how they approach cities, asking how can we help solve transportation problems, right? They're not looking to create technology and foist it on folks. They want to really have a conversation about it. And just felt that from a values perspective, we worked really well together in that regard. And we had a lot of thoughtful discussions with VW prior to the investment, and they saw it the same way as well. So we're trying to get a like-minded group of folks together that are in this for the long haul and committed to us.
We seem to see a number of companies. Ford has said, and I don't think they've backed off it, by the end of 2021, they want to have autonomous vehicles out there providing service. GM has said it's going to start building its autonomous Origin electric shuttles. I believe, again, at the end of next year. Is 2022 starting to shape up to be the year where we really start to see product on the street?
I think you're going to start to see it gradually from this point forward, and the key word is gradual, right? There's a lot we can do we talk a lot about in this business. We talk a lot about the technology, but we also have to start talking about what are the things it's going to do for people, right? What are the business models? What's the potential? And folks are just like Argo, Ford, and many others. We're learning as we go as to which business models make the most sense, what do cities need the most. So I think you're going to see, if nothing else, you're going to see a lot of experimentation on the business model front over the next few years.
This is a conference put on by Mich Auto with a bunch of nice sponsors.
It is.
What's your advice to the state of Michigan? What do we need to do to make sure that we're at the forefront and that we're relevant as this technology rolls out?
Well, I think Michigan is relevant. We have over 100 people here who are working on the autonomous systems development. They're not just doing sort of the vehicle side of it. We have a number of very skilled people here who are working on right in the heart of the autonomy software. I think this is a great place to recruit and to find some really good talent and folks who are hardworking, who understand the automotive process, which is really important, who know how to test and who know how to put real rigor behind products that need to scale out. I mean, some people who are not in the industry, they don't appreciate the automobile is kind of like 30,000 parts that come together at once, right? And if you've ever been to a factory and you see it come together and come off the line every few seconds, minutes, whatever it is, it's really impressive to see it, and it's magic, right?
I'm stunned they start up every time.
It's magic, and there is an awful lot that obviously goes behind the scenes to make that work. And I think Michigan's a really special place. The test labs, the supply base, people don't understand this, the logistics even of just moving tooling, moving test equipment and apparatus from one place to the next, being able to do those things quickly. Others have tried in other parts of the world and failed. Michigan is a special place. You can get things done real quick here.
Geez, I should be taking notes here as you talk. This is good stuff. So you started out as a computer engineer.
I did, yeah.
Now you're the CEO of a startup. What would you say is some of the most important lessons learned in making that transition?
For me, I think the most important thing was staying true to my values as to what I want to hold for our company's culture as we expand, not letting that get loose or reinterpreted over time, but just making sure that safety is our number one core value. There's a number of others that follow that, but making sure that ethos is pounded into the first 10 employees the same as it is to the 700th employee. And I think the second big thing is we made sure those values carried over to our relationships and early discussions with our partners, and making sure that they see the world the same way and don't compromise on things like that, especially when you're building such an important product like this.
I'm also really impressed that you've stayed in Pittsburgh. I mean, we know Carnegie Mellon was where all this started to flourish. Yeah. You didn't run to Silicon Valley. Why?
Well, we do have an office in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, but the company's not there.
Well, sure, no, it is. We have actually a sizable office in Palo Alto, and they're in a really important part of the mission. But yeah, a lot of our sort of executive leadership comes from kind of the robotics family that I was part of for many, many years out of Pittsburgh, and that is where I personally call home. But I see all of our offices as instrumental to executing the mission. There's no one office that's more important than the other. Michigan, Pittsburgh, and Palo Alto are the key engineering development centers for us, and we see specialization happening across those offices, because there's everybody has different experiences and skills in each of those areas. Pittsburgh's obviously very heavy into the heart of the autonomy system, just because of the close proximity to Carnegie Mellon and the resources available there.
Okay, we're getting down to the end here, bud.
All right, I'll go faster.
Elon Musk has said you don't need LiDAR for autonomous cars. What's your take on that?
Maybe 20, 30 years from now, you might be right. Look, I think LiDAR is a very effective way to field these systems today. The case is that it's an instantaneous 3D sensor. It's robust to a lot of things. It is complementary to camera and radar. I think because safety is number one, because it's so important that you have some redundancy in the perception system, that it only makes sense to use it. I think over time, we will be able to get the same performance out of a camera radar system. I just think that's not today.
Not today. So what would you like? I mean, here you've got an audience of automotive people. If you could say, hey, bring me this, that, or the other thing, what would that be?
You didn't say I bring my list.
Yeah.
Thank you, the shopping list. Well, I think the biggest thing is, and I get it out of the supply base, driver assistance technology is still a huge thing, right? And that's in the penetration into the fleet. We've only really just begun in some ways in getting that technology out there. I think what I would ask is just don't lose sight of the kind of the tail of your roadmap, where we do need to continue to improve the field of view, the range, and other important characteristics of the sensing that you're all developing. It's so important that we continue to push the limits on that. This is not just a software problem. The only way we're going to continue to solve bad weather and other challenges that are out there that folks don't talk a lot about. The only way we're gonna solve those challenges is both with software and hardware innovation.
Real good. Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, Bryan Salesky.
Thanks very much.
Good job.
Thank you.